Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Big Mark. Today we are talking about corned beef, pastrami, and brisket.
Yes, the main thing we're talking about is the basis of all that, which is brisket. And brisket is it's an inexpensive meat back in the old days, very, very tough piece of meat. And the origin of it for Jewish use comes from the Ashkenazi tradition when they came over into New York. And it's a type of beef that is slow cooked a long time, was inexpensive, and it gave sort of blended in with the preparations for Shabbat or Rosh Hashanah, Passover, all those things that are sort of going on now. And there's another example of when ethnic groups immigrate to the United States, they try and find things to recreate that they had at home, but obviously they can't afford it. So that brings us the story of Irish corned beef. And this is unbeknownst to me, to history, that the Irish corned beef actually, that these people feel originated in New York, again, amongst the Jewish community. The famous dish that the Irish loved was a bacon and cabbage. And they would have with fatback and that type of thing. And when they came over here again in the 1850s after the famine, they settled a good deal of them settled in New York. They couldn't afford the bacon, and being in the Jewish neighborhoods, with many of the immigrants as well, they found that the point cut of beef, or the point cut of the brisket, it was a great substitute. Had a lot of fat content in it, and as a result, it lended flavor to the cabbage or whatever other vegetables. It's all very similar to cooking what the slaves did down in the South with collard greens and all the other greens preparations they do. They'd have a piece of salted meat or whatever the slave owners didn't eat, which would be, again, the cheap cuts and, bony things. But what they wanted was flavor and fat. Fat is flavor, the flavor thing. So that's how the corned beef sort of originated. So what is this brisket? Well, it's about an 8 to 12 pound piece of meat that comes from the chest of the bull. And there are two of them, one over the right leg, one over the left front leg, so to speak. And they're pectoral, they're muscles. And it's a sort of muscle, it's two muscles. One sits on top of the other. And the one, like my hand, is pointed a little bit, sort of what they call the point cut. And that's heavily fatted and very flavored. And then the other one is flat, is a bigger one, and that's what they call the flat. And that's what most things are now. So the corned beef, as they say, started out probably the point cut, but now everybody else, they now use the flat part because it's much leaner, and a better piece of meat. Then you start thinking about pastrami. Well, pastrami is the same thing that came, again, Jewish influence from Romania. And I always remember a younger person convincing around Harvard Square. My stop I always made was Elsie's Deli in the corner of Mount Holyoke and Mount Vernon Streets. They had the hand-cut Romanian pastrami. It was fabulous. Anyway, that is now the original pastrami came from a cut of meat on the shoulder called the deco or the napple. But now people discovered that the point cut made great pastrami. And a lot of stuff that we saw the cheap sandwiches, which are always full of fat in the old days, that's probably where it came from. Now most pastramis now are actually made out of the flat cut as well. What's the difference in that? Well, that is all rubbed with spices, herbs, mustards, whatever, seasonings, and they wrap it up and season it in all those things so that they get, where all those spices permeate the meat. And then they take it and they smoke it. And then it's smoked. And then when you get it to cook it, they slow cook it, most often under steam. Any of you ever went to the Carnegie Deli or State Delis in New York, you ordered a sandwich, the guy would open up a drawer, like a steam drawer, and he pulled out this steamy piece of pastrami or corned beef as well. That was kept under moist pressure, under moist temperature, which kept it nice and juicy and full. So that's where that's where the pastrami comes from. Now the other difference you get back in the corned beef again is what's the difference between New York style and New England or Boston.
Mm.
The cures are exactly the same in both. They both are brine, and the difference in the New York one is they added in nitrates, either potassium nitrate or sodium nitrates, and that's where the pink comes from because I think it came from Potsdam cure, they call it. The sons of salt and potassium, the nitrates. They tint it pink so people will know they can't use it for something else and poison themselves. But it acts, it turns the meat pink when it hits it. So that's what the difference is. So the meats are the same. It's the brisket. So you go from that you go to Montreal. They can see my proclivity towards great delis.
Mm-hmm.
Cat's Deli and Boulevard Saint Michel in Montreal, and they have what they call smoked meat. And the smoked meat is something also akin to Texas barbecue, in which they use the whole brisket, but again, it's all rubbed with spices, spice rubs, cured with the rub, and then smoked for hours at very, very low and slow temperatures.
So
And
this is the flat and the tip?
Both, yes.
Okay.
Texas barbecue will have both, and I believe the smoked meat one up in Montreal was the same. So all these different cuts all come from, again, poor people's interpretation of using these lesser cuts of meat. But they have great flavor if they're cooked properly. It's long and slow. If you do it, high heat or boil it, it comes tough as heck. So it's just slow, let it simmer and break all that collagen down in there that it puts it together. So that for those of you who had what the mystery was to the meats, hopefully that'll answer some of your questions. They all come from the basic cut brisket, and the brisket that the Jewish people serve and the corned beef we eat are exactly the same cut of meat.
That's very interesting. Dad, is pastrami always smoked?
Yes, then it's smoked and cooked. I think it is, yes. Because they'll do now, you'll see turkey pastrami, salmon pastrami. You see different meats now being done, I suppose, because they want, not as fattening. But it's that same process. It's the smoking that gets it that flavor. Then they go right through the normal slow cooking that the other ones do.
Interesting. All right, cool. So I've got, so we're talking about brisket, and Passover is coming up. I have a kosher Italian wine. This is a Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, and from Borgo Reale. And this Abruzzo, of course, is just east of Lazio, where Rome is, and this is a great central southern Italian grape. You get some kind of cherry notes, a little bit of tar. Interesting. It's been open a couple of days, so it's gotten a little earthier. It was a bit more fruity when I first opened it, but
now that's kosher wine. Tell me what makes it kosher. What's the process?
It basically has to be supervised by a rabbi, and all of the work on the wine is done by a Sabbath observant Jewish person.
But the process is the same?
Process is exactly the same. The only variation would be if a wine is Mevushal, which this one actually is, and that involved historically boiling the wine so that non-Jewish people could handle it. If they were, whatever ancient version of catering went on, if that non-Jewish folks could handle the wine because it had been through this process.
Does the heating change it, flavor or anything? Or?
It mostly changes its ability to age, but what you need to do if you want to make a good one is to boil the must not try to heat it after you've made the wine. That can, really produce something that's not as good as the regular wine. But if you do it early, it doesn't make a huge difference. This is really good.
That's good. That's good to know.
So thank you for all that information. I didn't really know any of that. So a good learning experience. Have you checked out Waffles and Mochi yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, we haven't either. We're really looking forward to it. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. We appreciate it.